Hey, what's up guys? It's MyGamesJex here, and I wanted to make a mini guide on really sequencing with branded because I think that is one of those things again that actually will help your play a lot if you just know what effects to use before the others. I think I get a lot of questions, especially when the new Fallen of the White came out. You know, when are you supposed to use branded fusion? When are you supposed to use Fallen of the White? And overall, I think the consensus has been you use Fallen of the White going first because it generates you a ton of advantage, right? Being able to go into cards like Ecclesia the Dark Dragon gives you a summon from your deck or graveyard for any monster that basically gives you a combo piece, whether it's like Quem or Cartesia, right? Or Ecclesia. I think all of these, this card being able to get into all of these while branded fusion, unless you run like a ton of bricks, this card doesn't do a whole lot going going first. It's due to like 3 interruptions at most, maybe 4 if you're running things like branded sword. But overall, I don't think branded fusion is what you want to exactly be resolving going first. However, I think, especially going first, let's just say you draw. You know, this is actually a very good example of where branded fusion can come into real handy, right? So a lot of the time with branded, when you look at a hand like this going first, you're like, okay, how do I begin this? Like, wouldn't you go Aluber? But then it's like, what do I go from there? I think with Aluber, as long as you're going first, you always want to go for branded in high spirits if it's going to be live, because branded in high spirits is going to give you a ton of advantage. And it also Ash checks your opponent super well. And obviously if they impermed us, we can just use Fallen on the Virtuous to pop our Aluber to dodge the imperm as always. But if not, we can just keep that as a end board piece. But then you can use High Spirits, play around the droll, right? Like wait for the droll angle, and then go High Spirits. And if this doesn't get Ash, we could either choose Mercurier or Veiler. I actually typically like to, at this point, discard the Mercurier off the High Spirits because it gets you into something like a Renbrum. I think Renbrum in graveyard helps a lot, especially when you're not always ending on Mirror Jade on your end board and just making it on your opponent's turn. However, I think a lot of the time now, Branded High Spirits is actually just going to get Ash Blossomed, right? Your opponent is likely going to Ash this card in this format if they have Ash, so this makes it a great Ash check to see what they have. And let's just say this gets Ash at this point. Well, at that point, you can just go Branded Fusion, right? Now you don't always open branded fusion, but currently branded fusion's at 2 copies, so it's going to happen a fair bit. And you're not locked at this point. It's kind of actually similar when you go like Fallen of the White Dragon. It could have just been Fallen of the White Dragon the same, except instead of like and then branded fusion instead of a Luber, right? Because you would go Fallen of the White Dragon, send Albion, and we'll go effect summon out Ecclesia, and that's probably where your opponent ashes that, if anything. They could Ash on like Albion at the end phase. I just feel like you're giving up way too much advantage at that point. So if this gets Ash, then you can just go Branded Fusion because you're locked into level 8 fusions. But this just shows that Branded Fusion still has a huge place going first, right? Because you can go Branded Fusion and then just make an unboard. What I like to do is send the Tri-Brigade Springen's Kit, and then I guess OG Albaz in this case, since I've already gone to regular Albaz, and go into Albion and then get that into the graveyard. I guess why you also send Dogma going first. This is also a question I get, like, what do you send usually? I think Dogma is usually the safest thing to send. It's just like also playing around Droll. But we weren't really playing around Droll with this hand, so it doesn't really matter for Dogma. They don't even have a Droll angle for this. So having this there, so you can just go into the Albion, obviously, and then just revive the Albaz. Not use the Albion effect and then contact fuse off the Albion is pretty good. You could also obviously just send Cartesia actually in this case, which I actually think is pretty good, or like an Ecclesia to get that back since you already have Albaz on the end board, right? And then you can just contact fuse it plus the Albion into the Alba Lenatus. This is why you need to run out Lenatus right now in branded, because it's a really nice onboard piece and you need it for a lot of your branded fusion combos. And this just shows that branded fusion is not dead going first, right guys? Since you are able to just use it as a way to play through hand traps very well. It's a very just like great last card in hand, which I really also love about branded fusion. That is also the case, I think, going second. I think this is the other half of the coin, is when you get like a hand like this. Let's just say it's, I think, top deck was Fallen on the Virtuous when I originally did this hand. So this was just a randomly selected hand I got, and I was like, oh wow, this is a pretty good going second hand. I think I also had Fuelos, to be honest. I think it was Fuelos over Mercurier. I was like, it's one of the birds. Even though this is a jellyfish, like, it looks like a bird, but I thought, or no, I guess Perulia is a jellyfish. Oh well. So, like, going second, obviously, like, drawing your hand traps is going to be important. I know a lot of people are running, like, we just saw Andre Torres's second place list where he was maining Droplet, right? I think it just depends on your meta, if you're going to be maining Droplet or not. Because if you have a lot of Draco Tal around you, I think Droplet's quite good. Because it's just, like, pretty premium into dodging Flame and turning off Secretarion. But overall, I do think the hand trap approach is still quite viable. So, like, going second, right, just using your Valor and Fua to hopefully stop them and then weaken up their board. Even if they Ash the Fua, it's just like, okay, well, now they don't have Ash for Branded Fusion on my turn, and then you can go for draw for turn. That's why Fallen the Virtuous is at 3 in the deck. It's a great top deck. It's a great breaker. And now you might be like, okay, well, how do you sequence this hand? Let's just say we already use Fua and that just stopped their turn for whatever, and we sell Valor, because I think overall what you want to do usually is start baiting interruptions, right? I think like going second, going High Spirits with like a Spellcaster is so damn premium, because you can go High Spirits for Valor, and then you can pitch the Grand Guignol that we're about to, we also have a token, Starlight Grand Guignol, shout out to that. And this allows us to get a Grand Guignol into rotation, which is really good because your opponent is like, most decks summon a monster through a monster effect on your turn as an endboard kind of interruption. So Grand Guignol will usually be live, right? They can go IP into something else. I know not a lot of decks are running IP right now, but or 5 mana, right? So that can always trigger Grand Guignol, which can get you, or like Azuna, right? It's very hard for your opponent to play around that, and that can get you either Quem, but also I think going second, your best target to summon is definitely Proskinion. I do think Quem helps if it's a more simplified board state to summon off a Grand Guignol going second, but you know, going first, you'll always summon the Quem, I think, off the Grand Guignol if they go Azuna. I think that really helps complete your combo, but overall getting the Proskinion, that's why I do like to, you know, once again, just like Ash checking with High Spirits, right? Because it's at least a 1-for-1 at that point. And if not, that gets you Grand Guignol, which is this is why I always call High Spirits a breaker, right? Because you can send the Grand Guignol or like a Titan Cloud, right? Let's just say you had a Shrouded in hand instead. Well, now you can go High Spirits, send Shrouded or Albaz, right? And then in the end phase, after all is said and done, you can get an Albaz in the end phase, use off this card, make like a Dogma or something. And that's also why I like running double Dogma, right? Because you like to send one in your combo and then also make one in like the end phase going second, which is why Dogma is like a great board breaker as well. For the Albaz effect being able to take up 2 bodies. But overall, going second, like that High Spirits thing gets you to the Fall in the White. I always go for the Fall in the White because, yes, you don't want to make Ecclesia the Dark Dragon going second. In my opinion, you don't love doing that because a lot of the time, Branded Fusion just gets you bigger and more bodies for less advantage, right? Because if you go second into Ecclesia, you're getting rid of its 25, and then you have to have like a OG kit then to like go into Lubellion, into Mirror Jade, but Branded Fusion gets you over 5,500 points of damage, right, on board on this card alone, and you probably have something else to seal the deal, right? So I think that Branded Fusion just ends up being an easier card going second. So what does that mean for our sequencing? Well, that means you want to bait as much interruptions as possible, right? So you can go normal summon a Luber effect, right, like dodge Imperm with Fallen in the Virtuous worst case, but I think going second, you also want to save the Fallen in the Virtuous for like a Flame or a Mandate, depending on the deck. Maybe this gets negated or something, but also I think going second, you can always get the Branded in red or the Branded in white here, I think, when you already have Fallen in the Virtuous, especially like if you didn't have Fallen in the Virtuous. I always search this card off of a Luber, basically, especially if you open up the Branded Fusion. And then at that point, you're kind of just like playing with house money, because then you can go Fallen in the White Dragon. And here you can decide. What I actually like doing is I like to send the Ecclesia, because especially since the Grand Guignol might be banished at this point, or will be once they start interacting, you can go Ecclesia the Dark Dragon, right? Like, let's just say they just stop the Fallen the White Dragon. Well, we'll get to that, right? Because we go Fallen the White summon, and that gets us Ecclesia. And this is where you're like, oh, why did you send the Ecclesia? We're summoning out this. But the thing is, like I said, we don't want to go into this if we don't need to going second, basically, unless we're setting up for a grind game. I think setting up for a grind game is totally just fine with this card. going second, but going first, it's just way better because it keeps coming back, right? You get 2 uses going first, 1 use going second a lot of the time kind of situation, right? And it's less good at board breaking, whereas Branded Fusion, right, still gets you the Jade, but it gets you also that Albion, like a Spriggan's Kitten graveyard, which can get you to the 8,000 points of damage, right? So you might be like, what do we do at this point? Well, you can use Ecclesia here to tribute herself and then get you to the OG Albaz, right? So this is why I love the Fallen the White Dragon going second too. This is why we call it Ext Albaz, like Extra Zeal, because you're able to send the Ecclesia of the Dark going second, which is also a bounce, right? This can just target itself plus a fusion monster that's banished or in your graveyard, so it's really good recursion. And then you can target a card on the field and bounce it. And a lot of the time, they're just going to chain that card, and then the card won't be there, so Ecclesia won't bounce, which kind of sucks, but that just means we have extra fodder to banish for Mirror Jade with Branded Fusion without using a discard, so I'll show you guys what that looks like. But Albaz will be able to summon, use its effect, discard. Obviously, I don't love discarding white here, but we can reset it in the end phase because of Albaz's effect. It's just depending on what you really want to do, right? Because I think overall, if we just had still Fuba, right, in our hand, we'd still have a discard or whatever. Or maybe we have more discards because of Fuba, right? So let's just say we have another discard because we Fu'd our opponent, and then we discard that. And then we can go into Albaz, right, which forces an interaction, right? And sometimes your opponent can't do anything about it. So, like, ideally, right, you're making a Mirror Jade at this point, probably. Because I think that means you've gone to Mirror Jade without even going into Branded Fusion. And now your Branded Fusion, Branded and red or in white can do different things, right? You can go Branded Fusion in order to go into, like, Chaos Star Source, which is one of my, in, like, an extra body, right? So you can, like, send itself plus Fallen of the White. I really wish we had Cartesian rotation for this, but you don't need it going second at the very least. Like, maybe we could actually just, like, send Cartesia here and then revive it. That's always something to consider, but I don't have Quem on board, so, like, I'm not looping Jade as much as I would want to. But this just, like, provides yourself just a lot of bodies, right? Because then you go Albion and then Kit. Kit can then just summon out whatever, like, Ecclesia, the Kit Spriggans, right? And then just keep playing from there, right? Then just, like, banish the Albaz plus the other Albaz. It really doesn't matter. Like, you could also make Lubalion and do the exact same thing, but, you know, this is why also Chaos Star Source is extraordinarily important. You could also just make a Renbrum here. I think Renbrum is also pretty solid by keeping an Albaz in graveyard and then banishing the Kit. And then you have a way to, I think this card's also a very underrated board breaker, being able to negate an extra deck monster. So this is great into Yummy and things like that. And then you can always, like in this case, just go Branded in white. And then, you know, send the Albion, banish the Albaz to the graveyard, and then make Chaos Star Source. I think also, like, the name of the game with sequencing with Branded is using your available interruptions correctly, right? Because a lot of the time, you have to know how to use them wisely, right? Because you, like, let's just say you're summoning Dogma. Well, Dogma can very easily use up 2 different bodies, but what is good against your opponent at that point? Can Dogma spin back something that's meaningful? Well, that might lean yourself to making Dogma off of Albaz a little bit more. Also, Chaos Star Source, are you popping 1 or 2 cards, right? When is the Mirror Jade banish is going to be the best? So you kind of have to decide for yourself and navigate through your opponent's board state, either breaking the board or as a end board that you made for your opponent to play through. Just being able to use your branded cards in a card economy efficient way is super important, right? Like trying to do 2 really good removals for Dogma, right, is usually very high value as an end board piece. But then also, like, going second, right? Like, do I want to make Dogma now? Or do I want to do in the end phase with Albaz? I think end phase is quite good into VSK9, at least in my experience. And, you know, if you're able to deal with those bodies elsewise, maybe it's, like, better to do that in the end phase, right? So it's just stuff to think about. You know, shows like the engine board breaking with Branded and how, like, Branded Fusion's still useful. I think this was, like, a pretty good guide. Overall, if you guys want to see more mini guides, let me know. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and check out my Branded spreadsheet that gets updated every week. 200 plus combos, post burst protocol ready for Branded on my channel, or sorry, on my website. You can go pick that up and support the channel. We also have the 40-hour Branded guide if you guys want to learn Branded on a fundamental level that you can keep coming back to. And then also subscribe. We're putting up a lot of history of Yu-Gi-Oh videos over on my shorts. Road to 20,000 subscribers. Very much looking forward to it. And we'll be seeing you guys later. MetagamesGX signing out.